I'm going to go ahead and take this time to introduce our next speakers. My name is Jim Lee. I have the honor and the privilege of moderating not only the entirety of Track A this afternoon, but these two lovely ladies behind me here. I do try to be prepared, but for these two, don't need it. Don't need it because I've had the good fortune of knowing them for a little bit of time. If I were to actually read their bios, then it would take up the rest of our time together. So I have to come up with something else. So I thought of this. Through the leadership of Kim Glover, TechnipFMC has developed a wonderful team as well as a facility that I was fortunate enough to go through where they've connected learning and knowledge management together. A great peanut butter and jelly combination, right? Also, with Tamara's help here, these two are like peanut butter and jelly. Go perfect together, okay? So I hope they have the hardware ready for them, but if not, I don't want to cut into any more of their time. I'll simply say this. I'm going to name Kim right now in our presence, you will all be our witnesses, as the Queen of KM. Oh, no. Can we give her a big hand? Queen of KM.
No, I'll take Duchess. Duchess I'll take,
well,
not Queen.
Okay.
Jane is the Queen. Yeah,
okay.
Jane is the Queen.
I corrected.
Yeah.
But they come from a small town called Houston, Texas. So I will also call them the World Series of KM winners as well. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys now.
All right.
And thank you.
And we're going to get started even though we don't have visuals. Luckily, we both printed it out. We can keep pace with ourselves. We've uploaded it on the portal, so you'll be able to find it later. And if we get set up here, we'll just catch up. Do it really fast and make you dizzy. You okay with that?
Sure, I'm great with it. Excuse me, I don't have a mic, but I'll just kind of stand here if that's okay.
Or you can use that, up to you.
Oh, it's fine, no problem. If you guys can just roll with us, this is going to be a team effort, and we're going to rock it, right? That's what we do in knowledge management.
All of us.
That's right, let's do it. So thank you all for attending today. Our session is about peanut butter and jelly, and what does that have in common with learning and knowledge management? Let's find out together. So thank you, Jim, first of all, for that tremendous introduction. You have been an inspiration to us in knowledge management and a leader in our community, and we are the ones to have gratitude for you. Thank you so much. And thank all of you for attending our session today. I'm Tamara, and I'm a knowledge management program manager, and my presenting partner today is Kim Glover, and she is the Director of Knowledge Management and Social Learning at our company, TechnipFMC.
And we're really excited to be here today and grateful for you. You had other choices. Thank you for coming in here. And let's just get on with our story.
Absolutely. So real briefly, what is TechnipFMC? Well, we're an energy company. We're based down there in Houston. We have about 20,000 employees located in approximately 40 countries around the world. And those employees, they're in offices, they're in plants, they're in facilities, they're on vessels, they're at client sites. So you can imagine how important it is for us to use all of the tools in our arsenal to connect those employees, to cultivate them, and to empower and educate them and bring them to the forefront of learning.
So our next slide is an agenda slide, which I was not going to read because you could have seen it, but since you can't see it, I'll just tell you really quickly. We're going to dive into a Take 5 moment from Tammy. She's already given us TechnipFMC at a glance. Then we're going to talk about the why. Why are KM and learning together like peanut butter and jelly, or some other sandwich if you don't happen to like PB&J. Then we're going to do some case studies about the how, and then we're going to end up with key takeaways. So Take 5 moment, Tammy, without the visual.
Absolutely. So at our company, we start every meeting with a Take 5 moment, and it's an acknowledgement to our foundational beliefs, which now I get to do to my memory: quality, safety, integrity, respect, and sustainability. And it seemed appropriate today that we would talk about our Employee Development and Knowledge Sharing Solutions Guide, which just went live in August. And what that is, it's a repository, a collection that highlights our employee development and learning and knowledge management solutions and tools within the organization. And it's really important for us to empower our employees to provide multiple modalities of learning for them so that we can empower them to learn, to select the modalities that best cater to their schedules or to their learning styles or to their learning needs. Now, what's really interesting about this, Take 5 moments are a way that we circulate information throughout our organization informally. We didn't create this Take 5 moment. We created the guide, but we didn't create the Take 5 moment. Rather, we had an individual in HR, and she had to inform her constituents of all of the solutions in learning and knowledge management that were available to her. So she created that Take 5 moment. And that's really powerful when the work that you do is given legs by other employees within the organization. And we're going to have to let her know that we used to Take 5 at a conference. She'll be thrilled.
That's right. We're going to tell her that y'all loved it. Now, our next slide is a beautiful picture of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich being made. And we thought we would start out just by talking about that sandwich. It's a quintessential American sandwich. Now, I was going to say it's a quintessential sandwich, but I have learned from people this week and also from our Norwegian colleagues where we were a couple of weeks ago, not everybody, not every culture loves PB&J. Sorry about that. We didn't intend to not be inclusive. So if you hate PB&J or have a peanut allergy, we still want you. We still love you. Now, if you like peanut butter and jelly, we have a little quiz, not a quiz, a question for you. Creamy or crunchy?
Show me the creamies. Come on. That's right. You are my peach.
How about the crunchies? Okay, yeah, it's kind of an equally split group here. Well, on our slide is a sort of a set of characteristics about peanut butter and jelly and where we're going to compare them to knowledge management and learning together. And the first one is that a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is easy to make. And when you add KM to your formal learning, it's also easier and faster. The time from launch to business value can be decreased so you get there where you want to go quickly, just like it's quick to make a PB&J.
Absolutely, and it sticks together. You know, when you take the 2 pieces of bread and you stick it and you just hold it by one, it still stays together. And that's because the components of that sandwich, just like the components in learning and knowledge management, attract one another.
Right. And there's diversity in textures and flavors. Just like when you put learning and KM together, you have a diversity of learning modalities which can fit the individual and their own learning needs, as well as the organization and the collective learning needs.
Absolutely, and unique approaches can create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And that's true for both learning and KM and the PBJ.
And then finally, it's portable. A PB&J can be smashed together in the morning and brought out on a boat and eaten at 4 in the afternoon. It can go places with you. And learning and KM together have an agility that you don't necessarily have with just formal learning by itself. So that's the ways that we think KM.
There's one more, Kim.
Oh, is there one? Did I forget one?
Do you all agree that it's filling? It's kind of like
That's
stick
right.
to your ribs kind of food. It sticks with you. Well, the same can be said for learning and knowledge management. By offering different modalities of learning, studies have shown that it increases retention of the knowledge that you've learned. So just like the PBJ is stick to your ribs kind of food, well, learning and KM is stick to your brain kind of knowledge.
You can just take a bite whenever you're hungry for it. So we want to know a little bit about you. Who in the audience works in a combined learning and KM team at your company?
Oh, fantastic.
Quite a few. Woo! Who in the audience? Your question.
Oh, it's okay.
Go ahead.
We're so unstructured now. We're the on our rules, sister. How many of you are not really formally in charge of learning or KM, but you blend them together anyway because it just makes sense? Yeah, I see hands. Yeah.
Awesome. We want to talk to and learn from all of you. Maybe not today because we're almost finished with the conference, but we do want you to stay in touch. And our contact information is available in the big, heavy program guide. So our next slide, imagine a puzzle, 2 pieces coming together. Learning and KM were brought together formally in our company in the beginning of 2020, right before the pandemic. work. And we really have a mission of creating a learning culture where all of our employees can share what they know with each other and learn from each other. And we can thrive as individuals and also as a collective. This slide that you can't see, you may have actually seen before. Last year, my boss talked to it at KM World, which was virtual. And we believe that putting the learning and the KM teams together really enable us to watch the value chain from idea to best practice, to validation of that best practice, to formal learning on that best practice, to improvements to that best practice. And I think that's all I have to say there. But it's still me. And this one's really hard because it's a picture. Okay, a picture was drawn for us by one of our engineers a few years ago about how he viewed learning in KM. And it's an individual sitting at their desk. Can't tell if it's a man or a woman. And they're looking at a screen which has formal learning, and it's some equipment. And they're looking at another screen, which is the know-how network. And that is illustrative of knowledge management. And then out in the distance, there's a big piece of yellow equipment, which is what our company produces, equipment that gets oil out from under the sea. And there are some technical people in technical clothes and orange outfits looking and smiling because they're at the fingertips of that person. When you blend learning and KM, you really put what the organization knows at the fingertips of all employees. I urge you to look at our slides later when you can get on the portal and look at that wonderful picture that was drawn for us. I also wanted to remember to say when you put learning and KM together, in my opinion, you've got a hell of a sandwich. So it's still me, and you're going to have to, again, sort of envision, but we can start at the bottom. It all starts with competencies, right? You can imagine in an industry like ours, there are huge components of our employee population that we have to have defined competencies for. We want to know that the people who are driving the robot that can turn a valve 10,000 feet down under the surface of the sea have the competency to drive that robot to turn that valve. And so we have a competency management system, and we can audit against those competencies. And it draws learning from our formal learning management system, which is called iLearn. But it doesn't just have learning for competencies. It has all kinds of wonderful learning assets within it that are available on demand. And then, imagine we're moving up to the left corner of the slide. We have our communities of practice in a system called The Bridge. And these are business-sponsored communities that were established to meet business objectives. And then moving over this way, we have our wiki, our employee contributed knowledge, where anyone can share something they know, anyone can create a page, but an assigned subject matter expert has to validate it so that we as employees know we can trust that content. Right, Tammy? Absolutely. And the chapters in the wiki are associated with the communities of practice in the bridge. Now, these are not standalone. This is a whole ecosystem. So for instance, an employee drawing on a competency that she needs to go out in the Gulf of Mexico to go to a client site or a client big thing in the sea, a rig, I might be tired. She can click on that competency and she doesn't even know that where she's clicking through to is actually the wiki, because someone has contributed the perfect competency approved by an SME for what she needs. We connect the systems. People can go in learning cohorts. We can push them into the right community of practice directly after they've finished a class. We have peer-to-peer learning that happens there, and it's just this beautiful connection. And again, we hope you look at the slide later when you can see it on the plane, because you probably can't wait. And then Tammy's going to describe.
We know we have other branded KM solutions that we call our flagship tools. We have a weekly knowledge sharing webinar that we call Experts Explain. We also have an Illuminate podcast that talks about our business and our people. And we also have a tool set that we call Facilitated Collaboration. And that's to crowdsource ideas and gain consensus and just find innovative solutions to business problems. Now there's two tools or applications in that tool set. One is called XLeap. And it's a small team brainstorming tool where team members can log in online from around the world and submit their ideas, answer questions, categorize their input, and then assess the responses and even put together project plans. You can get like a week's worth of work done in an hour. The other tool is called Spigot, which has been rebranded as Idea Place, and it's a large-scale ideation and idea management tool. That's pretty snazzy.
And Spigot actually won second place in the Reader's Choice Awards that KM World did in the collaboration category, I think.
And actually won second place last year.
That's right.
Not that we're commercials, we just get a lot of utility out of them, so it's really just knowledge sharing, something that works. You might have your own tools, and we'd love to hear about it.
And we don't get any referral fees or anything.
No.
I promise. The reason we wanted to highlight this sort of the structure of the flagship components of our program is because we're going to be referring to them in the case studies, and Tammy's about to give you one.
Yeah, so we're going to shift gears here, and we're going to talk about some case studies. We've got 3 that we want to present to you, 2 in pretty grand detail, and 1 is more of a summary because it's just in its embryonic stages. And we're going to try and present those case studies to you in some structured format. So setting the stage, what the need was. Then we're going to talk about what we did and what the outcomes were of our efforts. Let's go ahead and get started. And I believe I'm up first. And it just kills me if there's no slides, because these slides are awesome. Only because there's a ton of information on them that show like the different tactics that we deployed and things like that. So please have a look-see later on when you've got a minute or 2. So our first use case has to do with the fact that we're deploying a new design methodology within our company. Now, the company is deploying this new design methodology that's actually based a lot on knowledge management principles. Now, we didn't cause this, but we're pretty ding proud of it, I've got to be honest. And what it does is when we design those big, giant products, what we're going to do with our engineers, and we have a very large engineering community, thousands around the world, we're going to ask them to increase their collaboration and their communication and document every component of the design process when they're designing brand new products, as well as improving those existing products that are already out there. Now, I'm sure all of you are going to agree that employee movement right now is really putting pressure on knowledge transfer. Do you agree with that? Yeah, I'm seeing heads. And the same is so with us. And that's a big reason why we're moving to this new methodology. With this new process, employees are going to be encouraged, or kind of required, to collaborate more, to encourage that social learning, that peer-to-peer learning. So by having people collaborate more, engineers, of course, we increase that social learning component, but also teaching them better documentation habits using a structured format. Well, what we're doing there is we're just ensuring that the organization is retaining more knowledge in case they move on. And we're also ensuring that that peer-to-peer learning is taking place and really grooming the next class of experts within the organization. And the business results, even so far, are multifold. You know, we're lowering costs and we're increasing quality, increasing efficiency, more opportunities for innovation, reducing risk, on and on and on. But I got to be honest with you. When we first rolled this out, do you know the engineers' opinion of our new approach? Yeah. They were unimpressed, to say the least. They were like, really, another change? They felt it was disruptive. They thought it was time-consuming. So it was incumbent on us to show them that that wasn't true. This was actually going to benefit the company, and it would actually save them time in the long run. And we had to show them how to do it. Sounds a lot like knowledge management, doesn't it? Let me tell you how we did that. It was a piece of cake.
Got it.
So our first step in the process was to find those learning requirements. Who needed to know what and when? So what we did is we got the team together, and the team, when I say the team, we've got 5 engineering leaders on the team, and we work hand in hand with them. They have full faith and trust in us in the learning and knowledge management group. And what we did is we used that tool, XLEAP, and we defined employee groups, essentially stakeholders, that would be responsible for folding GD3 into the process. And then for each of the employee groups, we defined what they needed to know and to what degree. We also went through and we guessed at some of the barriers that we might come across that would slow or impede the rollout. And we also brainstormed ways that we could overcome those barriers, overcome that resistance in case we encountered it during the rollout. I said they were pretty slides, and this one isn't so pretty, but there's the point to it, I swear. So next, for each of those employee groups that we defined, we then looked at our big old menu of learning and knowledge sharing solutions that were available to us, and even invented an extra couple. And we matched them up with the requirements that were defined for each of those employee groups. Now, you can see with that larger diagram that's on the right-hand side, well, actually, you can't see because the font's way too small. But what's important here are the axes. So going across the top, we have the various employee groups that we defined. And then coming down the vertical axis, you see that first year, all of the knowledge solutions and learning modalities that we created to address the learning requirements of each of those employee groups. And then that little diagram that you see in the lower left is basically just a schedule, and that's to demonstrate that partnership with that engineering team, because they full on accepted responsibility for this, and that demonstrates some of the milestones that we encountered. Now, the big thing here that I really want to stress with this slide is that when you take all of the solutions available to you in a formal learning environment and you combine them with those solutions available to you in a social learning environment, what you're doing is you're doubling your opportunity to provide learning to your employees. And what that did for us is it enabled us to be a little bit more customized for all of those little mini cultures that existed within those employee groups. And when I mean that, I mean like those profiles we developed based on different cultures around geographies or roles or ways we communicate, etc. Another thing that we did is that we also created a Racy Matrix, just so that we could understand the role each employee group would have in this rollout. But we edited it just a little bit. We added an E to the end so that we could capture those senior leaders and those sponsors who we needed to evangelize our new process. And by developing this Racy Matrix, it really helped us to further define those learning requirements for each of these employee groups and how they would use the knowledge that we were presenting to them. I swear, I just have bronchitis. I do not have COVID, and I'm not contagious. If I was contagious, she'd be very sick by now. The other thing that we did is that we came up with an AdCar-like change process, which is obviously based on the AdCar change management methodology, which is very successful. And what this helped us to do was establish a cadence for rollout that was palatable to our employees. We didn't want to go too fast, too quick. We needed to roll it out in a way that was acceptable to them. Now, you can see across the bottom, you have the AdCar stages: awareness, desire, knowledge, etc. And what you have across the top is that learning flavor, AdCar-esque methodology that we developed that really walked each employee through their own personal journey to adoption. And then, as you can see as well, as you move from left to right, you can see that the tactics that we deployed to satisfy the learning requirements of each of those employee groups get progressively more sophisticated. Now, the target audiences, of course, of each of those tactics were based on the learning requirements for those employee groups, but we opened it up to everyone, and they certainly all tuned in. Sorry. Now, we're still rolling out GD3. We're in the second year of a 3-year plan, so I really can't give you the total outcome. What I can talk about are some of the metrics that we're using to measure success. So like looking at the new products that we're designing, how many of those teams are utilizing GD3? And products that are being modified right now, where is GD3 being deployed? And of course, we've got usage statistics and attendance rates and a ton of other metrics that we're using to measure success. Excuse me. But you know, the best thing I like about this project is just the ingenuity and the fearlessness of the team itself. Our engineers, they really trust us. We have such a super relationship. One of them said over the summer, gee, I really wish we could have some sort of conference. And I said, oh, piece of cake. And so we developed what we called the GD3 Expo. And what that was is it was organized like a conference. We had an opening session complete with a keynote speaker. You know, I brought in leaders leader who was a sponsor of the project to set forward that messaging. We also provided success stories and updates, etc. And then that general session was followed by 3 breakout sessions that ran concurrently to one another. And each of the sessions addressed a different aptitude. So one session might have been introductory, working up to a more intermediate or advanced session. We had 1,000 people attend that opening session. In fact, we broke teams for like 30 seconds in the organization. It was one of my proudest moments. I'm kidding, I'm not kidding. But it was a really, really exciting moment. And overall, we got more than 1,500 training hours in one day. So that was a big win for us. We also did an Experts Explain, we did an Illuminate podcast, and we just launched this thing called Skills Sessions, and they're just 30-minute bite-sized webinars that focus on a more granular topic within the process. We also created about 50 pages inside the wiki, which is called The Well, and that's the who, what, when, where, and how of GD3. And we launched a community of practice, of course, because we're responsible KMers, that has really underpinned the entire process. Really, recently, over the past few months especially, that's gotten traction and the dialogue has truly increased. And that's because we really are utilizing it to support all the tactics that we're rolling out. So like if we do an Experts Explain and we get 1,000 questions, we take those questions and we move them over to the community of practice and we let the community answer them and build upon them and share their experiences, because that's the best way to learn. And peer-to-peer learning, you know, the credibility that you find there. On the right-hand side is our LMS, our Formal Learning Management System, and that's all of the courses that we've created. We've got a curriculum around GD3, and even more importantly, we have a playlist that not only includes all of those formal learning assets, but also all the social learning that we've done. So if I'm a new employee that's new to GD3, I point them to the community, and I point them to that playlist, and they're good to go. Now, other tactics that we've successfully deployed are listed there at the bottom. I'm not going to go through them. I will say right now at this stage in the project, what we're focusing most on, well, first, feedback. Where do we stand? Are we successful? How can we improve? Because we have employees that are very vocal. Ooh. We are also cultivating strong champions at this point. Those first adopters that came out in the beginning, well, now they're actual experts that can assist others. And finally, success stories. You know, we've got some successes that we need to broadcast to bring all of those laggards in. So what do those stories look like? What's the format? Who's going to do the stories? How will they be circulated, etc.? You know, I don't have true outcome at this point, but I can say that our employees are no longer putting up the stop sign. They're engaged and they're curious and they're on board. If we had done this 5 years ago, we would have done an e-learning and maybe a 2-day course, which is ridiculous because we have engineers all over the world, right? But because we're combining the social learning component of knowledge management with the more formal learning component, what we're doing is a lot more, and we're accelerating that learning velocity and doing that at a far lower cost.
Yeah. So we're actually at the time where we were going to stop talking and take questions, but because we started a little late, Jim, we're going to eat into our question time if that's all right. And then maybe you can contact us afterward and ask your questions. We hope you have some. We're going to go now to a different case study, and this one's all about leadership. Now, prior to last year, leadership development in our company was just for managers with direct reports, and it was handled differently in every region. Every region decided on the content, what leadership meant, and how it was going to be delivered. But even though these siloed things were very different from each other, they had one thing in common, and that thing was that they were generic, and they had the same leadership training for every person, whether they needed it or not. So Luis's leadership training would have been the same as mine, would have been the same as Tammy's, and we are not all the same people. So that is why we launched Leadership U, because all our employees need to have leadership skills from the top floor to the shop floor. So Leadership U has 5 components. What did I do? Oh. Moment of panic. Abated.
I'm just going to stand very still.
Yes. Has 5 components, and I'm going to walk you through them now. Our philosophy is that it has to be global. Leadership U, leadership for everyone, that's not just a tagline. It's a bedrock company strategy. It takes leadership skills for a person to use their stop work authority in one of our plants or at a customer site. For a technical service person to say to an angry customer, no, we're going to slow down and do it the safe way, even if they're yelling at her. It takes leadership skills to walk through the plant or look at any value chain and recommend and process improvements without disenfranchising people. It takes leadership skills for leaders to grow their teams and not try to hoard their capabilities, to enable their people to reach their own true potential and move on in their own dynamic careers. It takes leadership skills to recognize and report on a quality escape before it becomes a multi-million-dollar fix with an angry client. That's why we had to launch Leadership U. Now, for it to be something that's meaningful to Tammy and Luis and me and you, it has to be personalized, it has to be customizable, it has to be available at any time, like your peanut butter and jelly, and on-demand access. And then finally, we need to create this psychological safe space where people can dare to be leaders, can try and test and fail. Now, the second component is our foundation, and all of the content in Leadership U is mapped to our leadership model. And you see those 4 areas there. I'll make a confession in a moment. Engaging people, thinking strategically, driving results, and embracing change. And then there are 12 traits that indicate the behaviors and provide training and all kinds of assets around that we want our employees to have in the area of leadership. Now, the next component is our approach. It's the whole enchilada, the whole loaf of bread, and all the different peanut butters and jellies you can imagine, nut butters, almond, etc. And it puts learning in the flow of work so that you can just, as I said earlier, take a bite when you need it. It's not go sit in a classroom for 5 days straight and then forget over the weekend. It also is based on exposing employees to new concepts and new ideas based on evaluation. And that's where we start in the features. It starts with a self-evaluation, self-assessment that is private. I took it. Lots of people have taken it. I'll confess, this is the confession time. I did pretty well in 3 of the areas, but driving for results was my opportunity for improvement. I didn't have to share this with my manager. In fact, I don't think I did. But I started working on the learning that would help me get all the way to the finish line with my projects. The other thing is that, again, it uses the whole enchilada. The blended learning approach includes everything from executive leadership team town halls, where the first 50 people can sign up and go. 50 people from anywhere in the company, you just got to be one of the ones, to facilitated workshops on unconscious bias and blind spots, to TED Talks, to videos, to e-learning, to in-person training courses. Saw a picture the other day in Yammer of a whole bunch of happy, smiling people who had just been through Go Lead, our course for early leaders in Guyana. That was awesome. And then we pop everyone, or everyone has the capability to join the community of practice for Leadership U. So the design is the last thing I'll talk about here before outcomes. It's got to be easily accessible, and it is. Everywhere you go across the learning ecosystem, learning in KM ecosystem, you can get to Leadership U. Back and forth navigation is really, really easy, and it is reflected in all of those components that I showed you in the slide you first imagined, and then you saw in the learning ecosystem. So what are the results? We said we would talk about outcomes. Again, we launched this mid-year last year. It's barely over a year old. These stats there we pulled in the summer to apply for a corporate award, which we don't know if we've won yet or not. But you can see that of our 21,000 at that time this summer, over 6,000 had accessed Leadership U, and we had a bunch of learning hours, a bunch of courses taken, and that doesn't count the social learning components, which there aren't metrics for, except that we have more than 1,000 members in our Leadership U network. And then on the right, you can see employees are saying, hey, this is working, I can use this. It makes me feel more engaged, more like I'm contributing to company success. It makes me actually more self-aware that I wasn't so hot in driving for results. Pretty good at engaging people, though. I'm proud of that. So it's all about a culture change, right? And this is where the social learning component really helps, because it amplifies what an organization knows. And it helps to create that safe space where you can test out ideas with other people. So we're going to move on now. We've got one more case study we'll do really fast.
I can do it quick.
We can do it quick.
You bet.
We have the privilege of managing our company's expertise program, which includes our fellows and all through the levels of experts. We hosted their spring convention this year and identified when we invited legal to come in and talk to us that we have a gap in awareness about IP. So with our support, the fellows are sponsoring an IP initiative, which is called Think IP, and that name was selected through an employee contest using one of the tools that Tammy talked about earlier. And the idea is that through the E, the evangelists, which are our experts, that last E that Tammy showed you in the Racy Matrix, we're going to make sure that all employees know how to protect, to respect, and to contribute to our IP.
And this isn't a one and done. This is an ongoing project. It's evergreen. We need to teach our employees all about what is IP and how they can contribute to the IP. And so we'll continue to create materials as the campaign matures. In fact, employees are helping us create those materials. It seems like 6 months ago, but I think it was just the week before last. Kim and I were in Norway, and we met with the members of the technical expertise program there, and we did a knowledge cafe, and we asked 4 questions. What do you think IP is? Do you have any ideas for inventions, for new patents? How can the TEP or the technical expertise program support Think IP, and how do we engage employees around that topic? We created pages and pages of notes that we will roll into the program, and they will see evidence of their contributions in future activities.
And this project is a little different than the one Tammy showed you, where they started with requirements and barriers and tactics mapped to the different audiences. In this one, we're actually getting the technical expertise program members to co-create it. So they'll have that agency and ownership. So we're going a little more slowly, but we think it's the right tactic for engagement on this topic. Mm-hmm. So now we're at the key takeaways. There's more sandwich for you to look at there. No, don't go.
Just take questions.
Okay. The takeaways are on the board. Yeah. Maybe we could have a couple minutes for questions, Jim? Okay. But I really like to say long game. It's a long game. Okay, I'm done. Questions? Great. Learning and KM is 55 people. KM is 7 people. The case studies that we showed you, the first one that Tammy did, primarily KM led. Second one, primarily learning led, although KM had a huge component in it. Third one, KM led. We don't really keep track of them that way, but just to help you understand, one of our goals for the year was to ensure that we have KM embedded in every high-profile learning campaign, and I went to a meeting of the Norwegian learning team and I said, this is our goal, how are we doing on it? And they said, we dare you to show us one that doesn't include both. So that's kind of nice. What did he say?
And we're also, he's given away our jelly.
Oh, to the first person who asked a question, yay!
We can't give away the peanut butter because I got into it earlier. So. Sorry. We're also teaching our learning cousins about how to utilize a lot of our KM solutions and tools. So we're broadening our reach by creating other KM experts. We're taking over the world.
Other questions? There's 21,000 employees, and you had a question.
The bridge, I might have missed it. Is that running on a Microsoft?
Oh, good question.
Yes, it is. It's a custom.
Would you like me to take? Yeah. Because that's my baby project right there. We took it from SharePoint 2010 up into Office 365, and it's a combination of SharePoint, Teams, Power Automate, and then we have a custom designed discussion tool.
And she did a workshop actually last year at KM World, and is happy to share all the materials. She did with Louise.
Yeah, it's online. Check it out because it's got a lot of stuff.
Any other questions? Oh, right here.
Mine's just a praise for both of you. When we think about when KM came in initially, and the real question was, what about learning and how could they be combined? And this is the first time I've heard really a magnificent combination of the two. So congratulations.
Wow, coming from you, Nancy. Thank you. That's awesome. You know that you have been such an influence on us.
Yeah, we're among the greats here.
Connection before collaboration. Read her article. Any other questions before Jim throws us off the stage? No?
We can't thank you enough for your
Yeah.
attention, your great questions.
Yeah.
The biggest thing we like to leave everyone with is that we eat our own dog food. We like to share our knowledge. So get our email addresses. If you have questions, let's connect later. Don't let the discussion stop here. Thank you, everyone.
We appreciate you.
Before we let them go, one thing I don't know if you're aware of, but within the CAM World program, if you click on their bios, it should show all their previous presentations that are available out there. So please make use of those. They've got some great older ones that they've done as well. So again, if there was a World Series of Knowledge Sharing, they'd be a 4-game sweep as the winners. Please give them a big round of applause.